She walked into the ballroom as a poor black girl mocked by a millionaire, but when she spoke 9 languages, the laughter turned to silence, and the whole world stood to honor her. The grand ballroom of the International Business Summit glittered under golden chandeliers. Rich men and women dressed in fine suits and gowns filled the room, their voices carried across tables as they boasted of their wealth, of their travels, and of their power. At the center of it all sat Mr. Harrison, a millionaire known across the city for his fortune and arrogance. He tapped his glass and spoke loudly to the crowd. Do you know what sets the successful apart from the rest? It is not kindness, it is not dreams, it is power and money. Without those, you're nothing. His friends laughed and nodded, raising their glasses in agreement. At a corner table sat Amina, a young black girl, barely 21. She wore a plain dress, her hands folded calmly, her eyes, however, burned with quiet strength. She was a scholarship student invited to the summit for her academic excellence. Some looked at her with curiosity, others ignored her, as if she was invisible. Mr. Harrison noticed her silence and smirked. He called across the room, "And who might you be, little girl? You sit there with no word. Are you lost?" A ripple of laughter moved through the tables. Amina rose slowly, her voice clear. "I am not lost, sir. I am here as a student representative from the International Exchange Program. I may not have your wealth, but I carry something else." She paused, meeting his mocking gaze. "I speak 9 languages." The room fell quiet for a moment. Then Mr. Harrison burst into loud laughter. He slapped the table, shaking his head. 9 languages. He repeated, "You expect us to believe that, child? You must think we are fools even if you speak 2. That would be surprising for someone like you." His friends joined the laughter, their cruel voices echoing through the ballroom. Some whispered, "She is bluffing." Others said, "She wants attention," but Amina stood still, her chin high. She said calmly, "You may laugh now, but one day you will see that words are more powerful than money. More doors open with language than with gold." Mr. Harrison waved his hand dismissively. "Sit down, little girl. Do not waste our evening with fairy tales. This is a place for leaders, not dreamers." His laughter rang again, filling the room. But this time something about it seemed forced, as though deep inside he feared being challenged. Amina sat back down, but she did not bow her head. Her heart beat with quiet fire, for she knew something none of them knew. The summit had guests from all over the world, diplomats, investors, and leaders, and soon her gift would no longer be hidden. This was only the beginning. The evening carried on, the ballroom filled with clinking glasses and the heavy sound of laughter as wealthy men and women celebrated themselves. Amina remained in her corner seat, silent, yet unshaken. She knew deep in her soul that her moment would arrive sooner than anyone expected. Across the hall, the host of the summit, a tall man from Europe, stood to make an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored tonight by the presence of leaders from across the world. Our gathering is not only for business, but also for connection among nations." He introduced one guest after another: ambassadors from Asia, investors from South America, a princess from the Middle East, and a technology pioneer from Africa. One by one, they rose and greeted the crowd. Each spoke in their own language, their words proud and confident. Yet each time the majority of the room fell quiet, because most of the guests could not understand. Finally, the host invited an ambassador from Japan to speak. The man stood tall, his speech filled with wisdom, but most people in the room could not follow the meaning. Mr. Harrison leaned back, bored, tapping his glass with a spoon. He muttered loud enough for others to hear, "What is the point of all these languages? English is the language of business. That is all we need." Amina heard him. She stood slowly, her heart pounded, but her face remained calm. She raised her hand. "May I speak?" The host, surprised but respectful, nodded. Amina stepped forward. Every eye in the room turned toward her. Some rolled their eyes, some whispered, "What can she possibly say?" She cleared her throat, and in fluent Japanese, she repeated the words of the ambassador, translating his message into English for all to hear. The room froze. Silence fell so deep it seemed the chandeliers stopped trembling. The ambassador himself gasped, his eyes wide with joy. He nodded to her, bowing slightly arigato. He said softly, "Thank you." The crowd erupted into murmurs, some astonished, some doubtful. Was that real? Could she truly speak Japanese so well? Mr. Harrison frowned, trying to mask his surprise. He chuckled awkwardly. Perhaps she memorized a phrase. Anyone can fake a few sentences. But before he could finish, the ambassador approached Amina, speaking quickly in Japanese with complex words, idioms, and phrases. The crowd watched breathless, waiting to see if she could keep up. Amina responded with ease, her tone perfect, her replies natural. The ambassador laughed with delight. This young woman is a true linguist, he declared in broken English. Her gift is real. The audience broke into applause. Amina bowed politely, then turned to face the room. She spoke clearly, language is not a trick, it is a bridge. Tonight, I will be that bridge for every guest who wishes to speak. Her words spread through the ballroom like fire. For the first time, she was no longer invisible, she was the center. Yet Mr. Harrison still sat in his chair, stubborn as pride. Wounded, he muttered, let us see how long she lasts. She may know 1 or 2 languages, but 9 is impossible. No girl from her background could master such power. But deep inside, he felt something he had not felt in years, a ripple of fear. Because Amina had only just begun. The ballroom had shifted. The guests no longer looked at the millionaires in their shiny suits. Their eyes were fixed on the young black girl, who spoke with grace and confidence. The ambassadors began whispering to one another, intrigued by this sudden light in the room. The host seized the moment. He smiled at Amina and said, if you truly speak 9 languages, then tonight we have the chance to witness something extraordinary. He turned to the crowd. We have leaders here from every corner of the earth. Let us test her gift if she agrees. Amina lifted her chin. I accept, because words are my strength, not my weakness. The first to step forward was a businessman from Brazil. He spoke rapidly in Portuguese about trade and culture. The crowd sat puzzled, but Amina responded smoothly, her voice rolling with rhythm. She translated his words into English and then answered him in Portuguese, as though she had lived her whole life in his homeland. The man beamed, shaking her hand. Bravo, Menina, you are brilliant. Gasps filled the hall. Mr. Harrison shifted in his chair, trying to laugh it off. She must have studied Portuguese in school. Nothing impressive. But then came a tall woman dressed in royal blue. She was from Egypt. Her voice flowed in Arabic like poetry. The guests stared, lost in sound. Amina smiled and responded in flawless Arabic. She not only translated, she carried the same poetry in her tone. The woman's eyes glistened with respect. She kissed Amina's forehead, saying, you carry the spirit of many nations. The hall erupted with applause. The rich who once mocked her were now clapping. The secretaries and students who had been ignored leaned forward, their faces glowing with pride. Yet the tests continued. An old scholar from Germany spoke in deep philosophical German. Amina answered like a native, quoting verses and ideas. A French investor teased her with fast Parisian slang. She replied with elegance, faster than him. A Chinese scientist asked her questions in Mandarin. Amina responded with clarity, her tone sharp and perfect. The scientist bowed, saying, you are a miracle child. The room thundered with excitement. Guests began chanting for more. They wanted to see every language, every skill. By the time she had spoken in Japanese, Portuguese, Arabic, German, French, and Mandarin 6, in total the air was electric. People were on their feet, cheering, applauding. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Never had they seen such a display of intelligence from someone so young, so underestimated. Mr. Harrison, however, grew red with anger. His laughter was gone, replaced with clenched teeth and cold sweat. He slammed his fist against the table. Enough, this is a show, not business. You think languages make you powerful, child. Let me tell you, money rules the world. Not words, not dreams, only wealth. The crowd fell silent again. His booming voice carried arrogance, but also desperation. He looked around seeking approval, but none clapped this time. Even his rich friends lowered their eyes. Amina walked slowly toward him, her steps light, yet powerful. She stood before him and said softly, languages are not tricks, they're connections, they are doors that wealth cannot open. You speak of money, but tonight money has not moved a single soul, words have. Her gaze pierced through him. She turned to the audience and said, I still have more to share. 3 languages remain, and with them, I will show you what true power is. The crowd erupted in cheers. The millionaire who once mocked her was now cornered in his own pride. The girl he had laughed at was now leading the room. And the night was far from over. The ballroom was alive with anticipation. People leaned forward in their chairs, eager to witness the final part of Amina's gift. She had already spoken 6 languages with perfect grace. Each one had left the audience in awe, yet she had promised 3 more, and everyone waited in silence for what she would do next. The host raised his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to see something no business summit has ever seen before. A student from humble beginnings, proving that words are stronger than wealth. Amina, please continue. Amina nodded. She scanned the crowd and noticed a small group of guests from Russia. They had been silent the whole evening, not expecting to be understood. She walked toward them and in a calm voice began to speak Russian. Her sentences smooth, her accent pure. The men and women looked at each other in shock. They smiled widely and applauded. She translated their greetings for the audience, saying they welcome you and they hope tonight brings friendship between nations. The room filled with cheers. That was 7. Next, she turned to a tall woman from Kenya who had been standing quietly at the back. Amina greeted her in Swahili, using proverbs and expressions that carried deep cultural meaning. The woman's eyes widened. She placed her hands together in gratitude. She said softly, "You honor me, young one." The audience clapped again, louder now. That was 8. All eyes turned to Amina, wondering what the 9th would be. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she faced the hall and spoke in Spanish, her words strong, filled with passion. She told the story of a child who dreamed beyond borders. She spoke of bridges built not with gold, but with human hearts. She painted a vision of a world united by understanding, not divided by arrogance. The rhythm of her Spanish rolled like music, even those who did not know the language felt its power. Finally, she translated for the room. In every language I speak, the message is the same: respect is strength, connection is power, wealth without humanity is nothing. The hall erupted. People rose to their feet, clapping, shouting. Some even cried. The sound of applause shook the chandeliers. It was as if the very walls of the ballroom bowed to her voice. Mr. Harrison sat frozen, his face pale, his pride shattered. He could no longer laugh. He could no longer deny what stood before him. A young black girl from humble beginnings had done what his millions never could. She had touched hearts across the world in one night. Amina walked back to the center of the room. She looked directly at him and said softly, "You laughed when I told you I spoke 9 languages. You mocked what you did not understand. But now you see words can move nations. Words can change futures. Money cannot buy that." The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone waited for his reply. But for the first time in his life, Mr. Harrison had none. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted around, desperate for escape. But there was none. The power he once held over the room was gone. It now belonged to the girl he had insulted. The host stepped forward, raising his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, let us honor this young woman tonight. She has shown us that true leadership comes not from wealth, but from wisdom." The crowd roared again, chanting her name, Amina, Amina, Amina. That night, she was no longer just a student. She was a symbol, a reminder that knowledge could humble the proud, that respect could silence arrogance, that words could indeed change the world. And yet the night was not finished, for Amina had one last truth to share. The applause still thundered long after Amina had spoken her 9th language. The ballroom trembled with energy. People were on their feet, cheering her name, carried across the room, louder than any speech made by a millionaire or a politician that night. When the noise softened, Amina raised her hand, and the hall grew quiet. She looked around at the faces watching her, some still amazed, some tearful, some ashamed. She spoke slowly, but with unshakable strength. "Tonight, I did not stand before you to prove myself. I stood here to prove a truth that many have forgotten, that dignity does not come from riches, that respect does not come from power, that the human heart beats stronger when it is understood." She stepped closer to the crowd, her eyes sweeping across the room. "When I was a child, my family had little. We did not have jewels or castles. We did not sit in halls like this. But we had stories, we had words, we had dreams. And I promised myself that I would learn to listen to every voice, no matter what language it carried, because no voice deserves to be silenced." Her words washed over the room like a tide. No one dared to move. No one dared to interrupt. She continued, "Tonight, you laughed at me because of who I am, a poor black girl standing in a room full of wealth. But laughter fades, respect remains. I carry 9 languages, but more important, I carry the courage to use them for others, and that is something money will never buy." The audience broke again into applause. Some executives bowed to her. Some ambassadors placed their hands over their hearts. Even the host himself wiped tears from his eyes. But in the corner, Mr. Harrison sat stiff as glass, untouched, his arrogance crumbling. He had mocked her. He had tried to bury her under his laughter, and now the entire hall looked at him, not with respect, but with disdain. He tried to rise to speak, but the words died in his throat. His voice failed him for the first time in years. Amina walked slowly toward him, her gaze calm, but firm. She stood just a few steps away and spoke so only he and those closest could hear. You said money rules the world, but tonight you saw that words rule hearts. You laughed at me, but now the world laughs at you not because of wealth, but because of pride. He lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. The man who once commanded every room had been silenced by a student. Amina turned back to the hall. She raised her voice for all to hear. Let this night be remembered, not because I speak 9 languages, but because every voice matters, because no matter how small, no matter how poor, no matter what color or accent, every human being carries value. If you remember that, then tonight will not be about me. It will be about us. The crowd erupted one last time. The applause shook the ceiling. Ambassadors approached her one after another, offering internships, opportunities, partnerships. They wanted her to travel with them, to use her gift to build bridges. She accepted, humbly bowing with gratitude. By the end of the evening, she was no longer just a scholarship student. She had become a symbol of unity and respect. Her story spread across newspapers and networks. Headlines called her the girl of 9 tongues, the miracle linguist, the voice of many nations. And as for Mr. Harrison, his name appeared too, but not in glory. The world saw his arrogance, exposed. The millionaire who mocked a girl only to be humbled before all. He could not erase that night. He could not by silence. His power melted like snow under the sun. Years later, people still spoke of the evening. Amina had changed the way many looked at success. She traveled the world, building schools, programs, and communities, teaching young people the power of languages and respect. She proved that leadership is not found in wealth, but in wisdom, not in pride, but in humility. And whenever she told her story, she always repeated the same line: the night they laughed at me was the night they learned the truth. Laughter fades, but respect lasts forever. The girl who once stood invisible in the corner of the ballroom had left with the entire world watching her. Her legacy was not money, not titles, not jewels, but something far greater. She had given the world a new voice, and that voice could never again be silenced. Like and subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire and transform.